Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another video. So in this video, we will learn everything about higher order component in React with a practical example. Higher order component or HOC is the advanced technique in React for reusing component logics. I know a lot of developers, they avoid learning and think it's a bit complex topic, but I will try to make it as simple as possible. So if this sounds interesting, then stick around. Also, don't forget to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the videos like this one. So let's get started. Alright guys, if you are looking for a full-time job opportunity for you, then I have an exciting news from Relevel by Unacademy. It is India's first platform to help all aspirants have access to their dream job. By taking the Relevel test, they engage in comprehensive skill assessment, which industry evaluates relevant skills and their job readiness. If you wish to showcase your skill to the best companies in India like Cred, Grow, Upgrade, Misho, and many more, then what you can do is you can take part for the Relevel test for free on the platform based on your skills and time. Relevel has changing lives for months now. Find all the people who took the best decision of their lives with Relevel through their platform with the Relevel Achievers Twitter handle. Let's see how we can register for the test. So we will go to the Relevel platform and just click on the Get Hired. Now, based on the skills, we will select the test. I will select front-end development test. We can see the details and then we can select the slot based on our availability. And then we just need to upload our video resume. That's all. Sit back, take the test, and companies will reach out to you based on your score. You will find all the links related to the Relevel in the description of the video. Alright guys, so I have already bootstrapped my React application and let me give you a quick walkthrough of it. So I have a source folder and inside the source folder, you will see that I have index.js, app.js and app.css. So I have removed all the unwanted files that I don't want for this video. And I am running my application on the development environment. So you can see here the localhost 3001 and we see the app here. So the first thing we are going to do is I'm going to start with the very basic. So what we will do is I'm going to create a new component and I will name the component as users list.js. All right. And inside this component, I'm going to make an API call and fetch the list of users. So for this, we are going to make use of a JSON placeholder, which provides us the fake APIs. So let's go to the browser and I'm going to write JSON placeholder. All right, and if I click on it, then I will scroll down and you will see that we have the users. So if I click on this users, we are going to fetch all this data. So let's do that. So I'm going to do an import of React from React. All right, and then I'm going to create the component, which will be the users list. And this is going to be an arrow function. All right, and then I'm simply going to export the user list. So I'm going to do export default and this will be the users list. All right, and then we need to make the API call. So for that we have to use the use effect. So I'm going to import the use effect. So let me import the use effect, and I will also need the use state to manage the state. So I'm going to write a use state. All right, so if you don't know about the use state and the use effect, then I have a video on it. You can click on the card above and jump to it directly. So the next thing we are going to do is I'm going to create a state of the users. So I will write the constant. This will be users and I'm going to write set. All right, and this will be equals to the use state and the initial state will be an empty array. So I'm going to give an empty array here. All right, and then I'm going to do a return here. So let me do a return, and inside the return, what I will do, I'm just going to write here as div and I will write user list for now. All right, and the next thing I want to do is I want to use the use effect to make an API call and get the data. So what I will do is I'm going to write a use effect. All right, and this is going to be an arrow function. All right, and I only want to run this use effect once. So I will just give an empty array for the dependency, and I'm going to write a function here as fetch users, and this will equals to the async, and I'm going to write an arrow function. And then inside the arrow function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a constant response, and this is going to be equals to the await. And we are going to make use of a fetch API to make the API call. So I'm going to write fetch here. All right. And for the fetch, we need the endpoint. So this is the endpoint we are going to use. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add this here. Okay. So we have the endpoint and I need to add the double quotes. So let me add the double quotes here. All right. And when we do the API call, what I want is I want my response to be converted to the JSON. So what I'm going to do is constant JSON and I'm going to write an await and this will be equals to the response.json. All right, now once we get the JSON, we need to set the users. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write set users and I'm going to add the JSON to the user. All right, and let me do a console log so that we can see that we have the users properly. All right, and if I go here and if I go to the inspect element and let me go to the console, we will not see anything at the moment. So what we need to do is I'm going to do a fetch users. So let me add the fetch users. All right, so we are making the API call, but we need to import this user list in our app component. So let's go to the app.js. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to write an H2 here and I will write higher order component. All right. And then inside that, I'm going to write a div and I'm going to give a class name as section. All right. And inside the section, I'm going to add the user list. So let me import the users list. All right, and I'm going to add the user list here. So let me add the users list. All right, and now if we see that if I refresh my page, then I should be able to see something, but I'm getting an empty array. So let's go here and instead of users, let's add the JSON and see if we are getting the data or not. So if we change it to the JSON, we see that we get all the data. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to list all the users and we are going to display it on the screen. So for that, what I will do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to add a render user here. All right, and now we just need to write the renders users. So let's go here and I'm going to do a I'm going to add a render users and this will be equals to the users dot map. All right, and then I'm going to get an individual user. All right, and this is going to be an arrow function. And here we are going to return a JSX, which what we want to return. So what I will do is I'm going to write a div and I'm going to give a key to the div and that key will be equals to the user dot ID. So if you see here, then you will see that we have the user and when we have the individual user, we have the ID and the name. So we are going to add the ID here. All right. And inside that, I'm going to add a paragraph tag. And inside the paragraph tag, I'm going to add a strong tag. All right. And here I'm going to add the user dot name. All right. So now we have the rendered users and we have also given a reference of the rendered users. So let's go and see that if we see the users or not. So if I come here, then we can see that we have all the users which we have fetched from the API. Now, the next thing we need to do is I want to add a search functionality to this. So I'm going to come to the higher order component. I know that we are trying to learn a higher order component here, but let's build a search functionality and then we will see that what higher order component can help us here. So I'm going to go here and I'm just simply going to create a constant. All right, and this will be equals to the term and I'm going to do a set term. All right, and I'm going to give a use state and the initial state will be the empty. So initially I want my input box to be empty and I'm going to create a input tag here. So let's go here and I'm going to create a input tag. So let's change this to a multi-line JSX. All right, and I'm going to write a input type is equals to the text and the value will be equals to the term. So I'm going to add a term here and I'm going to close this input in the end. I need to wrap this in a div. So let me add a div and I'm going to cut this. All right. And I'm going to add this in the end. Okay. So now we have a div, which we have an input tag inside it. And what I'm going to do is on change, I have to set the term value. So that will be equals to an arrow function. All right, and this arrow function will give us an event and inside the event what we are going to do is we are going to do a set users and this set users will be equals to the event dot target dot value. And I'm sorry, this won't be a set user, this will be set term. So this is our search term. So what we need to do is whenever we have the set term, we have to make a filter of the list based on whatever the user is typing. So what I will do is instead of this render user, I'm going to create here a let filtered users. All right. And this is going to be equals to the users, whatever the users we have. And we have to add a filter on that. We have to search by name. So I'm going to destructure the name. All right. And then we are going to have an arrow function. And inside this arrow function, what I'm going to return from here is I want to return that if name has a index of, so I'm going to write an index of, and the index of will be the search term, and this should be equals to the 0. And once we return it, I want to loop through all the users and I want to display it. So for that, what I will do is I'm going to do a map. All right. And we already have a map here, so I can simply do a copy of this. So I'm going to do a copy of this and I'm going to add them here. So it's just a simple search functionality. So if you don't know how to build a search functionality, then I have a video on it. You can click on the card above and jump to it directly. All right, now we have, and what we need to do is I just need to do a copy and I need to add this filtered users here. All right, now if I go and test it, so if we go here and if I test it, then you will see that we are able to do a search here. All right, so this is a very simple thing, but now let's assume that your application has some more components and there also you need a search functionality. So what I'm going to do is let me create one more component here. So what I will do, I will go here. So first let me add here the h2 tag and I'm going to add it here as users. All right, so that we know that these are the users. Now I'm going to create a one more component and I'm just going to copy paste everything what I have in the users list. So let's go to the source. I'm going to create here as to do list .js. All right, and I'm just going to do a copy paste of this. So I will copy this and I'm going to paste this here. Okay, and here instead of the user list, we are going to change this to the to do list. So I'm going to do a D and this is going to be to do list. All right, we exported it. I will come to the app.js, and inside the app.js, what I will do is I'm going to write here a div. So let me add a div, and inside this div, I have the user list. Then I'm going to have another div, and inside that div, I'm going to have the to-do list. So let me add the to-do list. All right. So now we have the users and we have the to-do. So I will go here and let's make the changes, whatever we need. So instead of users, we are going to have to-dos, and we are going to have set to-dos, which will also be an array. We will also have a search functionality. So let's keep it as it is. And instead of users, we are going to fetch the to-dos. So if I go here and you will see that we have the to-dos. So if I click on this, then we see that all the to-dos. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to add this here. So let me add this here. All right. So now we have the to-dos. We have to set the to-dos. So I'm going to do a to-dos set to-dos. So let me change this to a capital T. And instead of the fetch users, we are going to have the fetch to-dos. So let me add the fetch to-dos. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to add it here. Okay, instead of the render users. So we are not going to use this render user now. So for now, I will just comment this out. And instead of filtered users, we are going to have the filtered to-dos. So let me add the to-dos. This will become to-dos. And this is going to be the title. So if you see here, we have the user ID and we have the title. So for that, I'm going to change this to title. And this will become a single to-do. Right, instead of key we are going to have the to do dot user ID. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add this user ID, and here it will become to do dot title. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add this title here. All right, and here instead of h2 users, we are going to have the to dos here. Okay, the search term will still be the same, and instead of this we are going to have the to dos filtered to dos. So let me copy this and let me add this here. So I'm going to add this here. All right, and now let's test it. So if I go here and if I expand this, all right, so what we will do is I don't want to see all these to dos. So for now, what I will do is I'm simply going to do a slice of it. So let me add the slice here. So I will do a dot slice, and I only need to add the 10 to dos. All right. So now if you see that we only have the 10 to dos, and let's show these to dos side by side. So I'm going to simply do a CSS change. So I will go here, and here I'm going to add a section, and inside this section I'm going to do a display flex. All right. And then I'm going to do a justify content as space around. All right. And now you see that we have the users, we have the to-dos. So let me search the to-dos. I can search the to-dos as well. All right. So we see a lot of lists. So what I'm going to do is I will actually add the to-dos here. So I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to add the list here. So let me add this here. Okay. And let me refresh it. So we have only 10 to dos, and if I search it, then we will be only be able to search in those 10 to do list. So now you have noticed here that a lot of thing in both the components. So this is one of the component, the to-do list. This is the other component, the user list. But there's a lot of logic in both the components is common. And we don't want to write the logic again and again in different components. So what we can do here is, this is where we are actually going to use a React pattern, which is the higher order component. We are going to create a higher order component, which is going to accept a component, and it's going to return a new component. And we can take out the logic, the common logic in both the components, and put it in the higher order components. So let's see how we can do that. And this is how the higher order components are very useful. And it's a bit of complex, so a lot of people avoid learning it. So let's create a higher order component. So what I will do is I'm going to go to this source, and I'm going to create a hoc.js. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import React first. All right. And React will be coming from the React. Yes. And then I'm going to write a constant HOC will be equals to the arrow function. And this HOC component is going to accept a component in it. So I'm going to write a wrapped component. All right. And I will also going to pass an entity. So I'm going to explain you what the entity is. So I will add the entity here. All right. And what is going to return? So this HOC, the higher order component, is going to return a new component with some additional functionalities. So what I will do is I'm going to return here, and I will return a new component. So let me add a return extends react dot component. All right, so I have this, and this React component will have a render function. So let me add a render function. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to extract the search logic first. So in order to extract the search logic, and you will see that the API calling logic is also almost same. The only difference is we are fetching to-dos, and for this one we are fetching the users. So we can actually pass the users and to-do as an entity. So this is the entity. That's why I have given an entity as a prop. All right. So let's create the state first. So I'm going to create the state, and we have two states. So if you go here, you will see that you have the users, you have the term. So for the users and for the to-dos, I'm going to name it as the data. All right, which will be an empty array. And the other one is the term. So for the term, I'm going to give an empty string. And we need to do an API call. So for that, what I will do is I'm going to write a component did mount. All right. And inside this component did mount, and this is going to be equals to, so let's go and copy paste this. So I'm going to copy this complete. All right. And I'm going to add this in the component did mount. And instead of the fetch users, I'm going to do a fetch data. And instead of the set users, I'm going to do a set data. All right. And I'm just going to remove this, and I will change this. All right. And this, instead of the set data, we are not using the use state. So this will get changed to this dot set state. All right. And I'm going to take all the existing state. So this will become this dot state, and our new state will be for the data. So for the data, I'm going to add the JSON value here. All right, so now we have set the state, and what we need to do is we need to make this also dynamic so that it can be used both for the to-dos and for the users as well. So I'm going to change this to a backtick, and here I'm going to change this to the entity. So whatever the entity we have, so let me add the entity. All right, so now we have the entity, we are able to fetch the data. So let me call this fetch data function. So I'm going to call this fetch data function here. And this is going to get all the data. The next thing we need to do is we also need to add the functionality for the search. So for the search, what I will do, I will go in the render and I'm going to do a term. So I'm going to destructure the term and the data that we are having. And this is coming from this dot state. And then what we are going to return from here is, let me add the return. All right. And we are going to return the input tag. So first, let me add the h2. And in the h2, I'm going to add the entity so that we know that we are creating this for the users or for the to-dos. So I'm going to add the entity here. All right. And then I'm going to add the input tag. So let me copy the input tag from here itself. So you will see that this is also being repetitive. So I'm going to copy this complete. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add this here. All right. But we have to make a little bit changes and let's add a div here. So let me add a div and we need to change this. So this will become the term. And for this one, this will become this dot set state. All right. And we are going to set the state with a object. And initially we are going to take this dot state first. So let me add the state. And then for the term, we are going to add the event dot target dot value. So I'm going to cut this and I'm going to add it here. All right. So now we have the input, and in the end, what we need to do is whatever the wrapped component is, we have to add the wrap component. So I'm going to add a wrap component here. All right. And this wrap component will actually take a prop. So what I'm going to pass it from here, I'm going to pass it from here, the data. And what data it's going to take? It's going to take the filtered data. So let me add a filtered data here. So right now we don't have any functionality for the filtered data. So let me add the functionality here. All right. So I'm going to do a let filtered data. And this is going to be equals to the data dot filter. All right. And I'm going to have the D as a individual object. And this is going to be an arrow function. So what I will do is that if my entity, so let me add the entity, and this entity is equals to the users. All right, then in that case, I want to destructure this D as name. So I'm going to do a destructure and I'm going to have the name. This will be equals to the D. And if it's not the entity, then it will be a to do. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an entity and this is equal to the to dos. Then in that case, I want to destructure the title. All right. And this will be equals to the D. Okay. So now we have destructured and we just need to add the logic for the filter. So for that, what we are going to do is we are going to take this. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add this here in the HOC. All right. So this is for the to dos. But for the list, what we need to do is we have to take this and we have to add this here. All right, so now we have written our first higher order component. Now let's see how we can use this higher order component and make our application work. And this will actually help us to eliminate a lot of the common logic from the user list and the to-do list. So let's go first. So we haven't exported it. So let's export it first. So I'm going to click here so that I can see, and I'm going to export default HOC. All right, so we have exported it. Now let's see how we can use this HOC component to reduce the repetitive logic. So first let's go to the user list. All right, and in the user list, what I will do is I will have the data as a prop. So if you see that we pass a data as a prop, so I will go here. I'm going to destructure the data. So let me add the data. All right, we have the data. We are not going to use this anymore because we are going to get all this information from the HOC component. All right, so we have removed that part. We don't want the filter as well because filter will be done on the HOC side. So I'm going to comment this out as well. All right, we don't want this. We don't want this as well. Okay, now only thing we need to have is the rendered users. So we have the filtered data here, but we need to display this data. And this data can be displayed with the help of this render user. Instead of users, it will become the data. and I'm going to get the user inside the data. Then I'm going to have the data and I'm going to have the render user as here. So let me copy this and let me add this here. All right. But instead of exporting a user list, which is not of a use because we don't have any functionality in the user list. So what we will do is we are going to create a new constant, and this will be equals to the search users. And this search user will be a new component which will be returned from the HOC. So I'm going to pass in the HOC what I need to pass. I need to pass a component which is a user list, and I need to pass an entity. So the entity is the users. All right. And when I pass this in the higher order component, it's going to return me a new component. So this is my new component, search users. So I'm going to export the search users. All right, I will save it. And now I can use this search users inside my app. So I'm going to remove this. And instead of this, I'm going to do a search users. All right, let's see and let's check that we are able to do a search on the user or not. So I'm going to minimize this. All right, I will refresh this. And if I try this, then we are still able to use this. Let me go to the user list. And inside the user list, there is no logic. So if I remove everything from here, then you will see that we don't have any logic inside the user list, and still we are able to work on the search. Now we can do the similar thing on the to do as well. So here I'm going to remove all this stuff. All right, and we are going to get the data. We only want this render to dos. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to add here to dos. All right, and this is going to be data. And on the data, we are going to put a slice. So let me add the slice. And I only want the 10 records. So this will be 0, 10. And then we have the to do. So this is going to become a to do. This will become to do, and this is going to be a to do username. So this is become to do title. All right. And we don't want this anymore. So let me remove this as well. And here, instead of the filtered to dos, we are going to have the rendered to dos because the filter is already done in the HOC component. Let's remove all this. Okay, let's remove this as well. And you will see that we have to create a new component. So that will be equals to the search to dos. And we are going to pass this to an HOC component. All right. And it will going to take the to do list and the entity. So for the entity is to dos. All right. And let's export this search to dos. Okay. And let's go to the app.js. And inside the app.js, instead of this to do list, we are going to have search to dos. All right. And now let's test it. So if I go here and if I refresh it, then you will see that we have this as well. All right. And we have a problem because we see a lot of records, more than 10. So what we can do is we can go back to our code. And in the code, if we go to the HOC, and inside the HOC, if you see that we have a filter. So before the filter, we can actually do a slice. And on the slice, I can do 0, 10. All right. And now if I go to the to-do list and let me remove this, we don't want this now. Okay. And now let's test it. All right. I will refresh it. And if we see, then we can see that we only have the 10 records. And if I search here, then we will see that this also works fine. So this is how the higher order component is useful to extract your repetitive logic and put it in the higher order function. So it helps you to reuse your component logic. So if we go back to our code, and this is our higher order component, and now this component, higher order component, can actually be used at various places where you need a search on a list. So you're going to pass the component and you're going to pass the entity if you want to have the API call inside your higher order component. So that's all I have in this video. I hope you understood the higher order component well. Now you know exactly what's the use case of this higher order component. It's a bit complex topic, but I try to make it as simple as possible. So I hope you liked the video. A thumbs up is appreciated. You can also connect with me via Facebook or Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter for latest updates. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the videos like this one. I will add the GitHub link in the description so that you can download the code for the reference. Thank you. Thanks for watching.